What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but we are now back in the saddle. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by, as always, the one and only Keenan Cummings. So, Keenan, while we have been off the podcast airwaves, there's been a lot going on, and we're going to get into it. So, both football and basketball roster movements, and then as well as a little bit of baseball stuff going on, if you couldn't tell. So let's start with football. There's been the spring portal window, and there are a lot of departures from West Virginia, which we had previously outlined. But now there have been a lot of additions, and the additions have come across the board: offense, defense, you name it. And right now, there are a lot of guys and a lot of places, and that seems to be the theme of just add, and then subtract later. What are your overall takeaways from this period of recent additions?
Yeah, you can basically say we took a spring break, but we actually didn't because really we were just working the whole time. But I think that when you look at what West Virginia was able to do here, they brought in, I believe, it's 22 transfers, 3 junior college players. Man, that's a lot. Yeah, I remember saying on one of our last podcasts, there's going to be some more roster movement. I did not anticipate that much. West Virginia, they blew past the 105, I think, after that first week. I think it was April 17th, April 18th was the first transfer commitment of this new wave. And then before you know it, they were up to 118 as they are right now. So I think the thing to me that maybe was the most interesting or maybe most transparent thing, Rich Rodriguez said multiple times towards the end of spring that, what positions need addressed? He said basically everyone except quarterback. We might even bring in a kicker. He wasn't kidding. It wasn't coach speak. They addressed just about every position. They brought in multiple running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, safeties, cornerbacks, linebackers, pass rushers, every position. And I do feel on the surface, there were some question marks coming out of the spring, not necessarily from what we saw because it was so limited, but based on, what we had heard a little bit and, just looking at the composure and kind of the composition of the roster. I think they've addressed some of those needs. Like I personally, now that doesn't mean much right now, but I personally feel a lot better about the offensive line right now with what they were able to do, going out and getting some of those guys that they were able to get. And really not only for this year, but in the future. I know it's hard to look ahead further than a couple months now, but I feel better there. I feel better defensive line. I feel better with pass rushers, wide receivers. I think that they did a good job in tight end. And honestly, running back, that was a position that I didn't think they were going to go with just 3 guys, 4 if you count the non-scholarship guy. I didn't think they were going to do that, but I didn't know they were going to add 3 more. And all 3 of them have a lot of experience and have played well. So I think they did a good job reshaping the roster. And we could go down and pick out our favorite commitments, but I think you guys know by now who's in the fold and kind of what you're thinking. But I do think the most encouraging part to me is not only getting experienced guys at positions they really needed. For example, I'll use tight end, for example, like a Grayson Barnes, a versatile pass catching guy to kind of put in there and complement what Jacob Barrick brings to the table. But then you go out and get Ryan Ward, a younger, high upside guy, kind of a do-it-all type guy that maybe he's in the mix this year, but next year he's probably your starter if he's not this year. So they did a good job mixing and matching there. And, Rich said all along that they weren't going to just take guys. It wasn't just we'll shoot for guys with 3 years left. They'll take the best guy at each position. But I do see if you look at the additions they made in the position rooms, most of them, there's a balance to it. And I think that they did a really good job. You're up to 118 now, which that thing dipped down to, what was it, 92, I
Yeah, I
believe?
think it was in the low 90s there.
92 after spring. And if you look at where a lot of those guys that are leaving are going, I think that tells you kind of what you needed to know, where they stood and kind of where they were at. And then you're bringing in a good mix of guys, some power 4 guys, some high-level FCS guys that have played well, a group of 5 guys, junior college guys, they even Division II. So I think that they did a pretty good job, all things considered. Now, well, what does that mean in the fall? I don't know, Wes. It was hard enough. I don't know if you checked out my depth chart today, my offensive depth chart, but it was hard enough just trying to put that thing together. Forget trying to look at predictions right now.
Yeah, let's real quick, let's just look at the numbers for it all because I think that kind of is able to help put things in perspective when you talk about how many people they added at different spots. Position wise, let's start with the offensive line. 22 guys on the offensive line out of your 118. Like that's a lot of bodies. And when you break it down, you've got 5 seniors and then 4 juniors. So there's that experience factor kind of going into this. Wide receiver, they got better there. They got proven experience there. Logan Ramper, he was a big one from Slippery Rock. And once again, 6 guys who were seniors and then 4 juniors out of your 16 guys in that room. Same thing with running back. 4 out of your 7 are juniors and seniors. Quarterback, 4 out of your 7 are juniors and seniors. And then when you look at the roster as a whole, you've got 24 juniors and 41 seniors. So that's 65 dudes out of your 118. That's more than half, probably creeping up close to 60-ish%. But then you've got 20 true freshmen too. So there's a good chunk too in terms of the kind of building for the future. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for coaches now and in the next whatever the short-term period you want to put on it is because every team and roster is kind of in a win-now mode with the way you can move things, as we've obviously seen here. How do you address the future needs of kind of building a foundation while also addressing the elephant in the room of how can you win as soon as possible? And if there's a governed scholarship limit, which right now, who knows what that 105 number looks like because it's as muddy as it can be with all the different chaotic moving parts in it. Like that's going to be the hard part because do you really want a quarter of your roster as a freshman class when they probably won't play a ton and you have to win now? So like, where does that balance come in? And then at what point you kind of stick to being younger and then stick to possibly trying to get older? I think that's going to be the biggest thing, not even just this year, but going forward is where's that balance in terms of how do you, if there's a 105 number, how do you put out 20% for true freshmen? Like where do you draw the line? Because every coach in America is going to want to say, we want to build and have dudes who are young and we can develop. But every coach in America also wants to win. And so that's the big thing. But you can see on offense, on defense, there's a lot of experience. One thing that stuck out to me was the linebacker in that edge spot, Keenan. 15 guys there. And a few returners. I think out of when you kind of look at this list of this roster, that's kind of the most concentrated list of dudes who are coming back. I would say there's not a ton, truthfully. But that'll be interesting to see, I think, where are the dudes that came back and were at WVU last year? How do they find their way into the fold heading into the summer and fall?
Just to speak kind of the numbers you were talking about, just how crazy college football is now in general. You mentioned that 41 seniors on the West Virginia roster right now. 5 started their career at West Virginia. 5.
Yeah.
That is unreal to me. Just shows you the chaotic nature of this, the turtle shell game of moving pieces around and guys coming in. To answer your question, Wes, a little bit for me, I think it's always going to be important. And I don't think you see this every year at West Virginia. I think they're going to see him use the transfer portal. I think Rich Rodriguez made that clear from the day he was hired. I don't think you see 76 new players every year. I think that you want to establish a culture, and you do need those guys kind of like that Ryan Ward or, some of these guys that have multiple years of eligibility, Christian Hamilton, guys that have high upside and years of eligibility left that can develop in your program. But I do agree it's changed. I don't think you see schools go out and take 25 freshmen anymore. I just don't. I think that you'll take the guys you really, really want and the guys you think it can help you, and then maybe a few developmental guys on the lines because they usually aren't going to play early, but you're not going to take as many chances on some guys that maybe in the past you had to, because this isn't even possible, 7 or 8 years ago. West Virginia's not doing what they're doing right now. This is only possible because of changes that have been made. It's crazy, man. I mean, Rich and his staff have brought in 64 new players, and then you have 12 that signed under Neal that are here. I mean, it's 76 of your 118 right now. I mean, that is absolutely staggering, just how much change and how much.
And there's going to be more change as you get into the summer before fall camp, because I mean, there's a possibility like that 105, like no one knows, so they might have to cut down again. They might have like the movement is not going to end anytime soon, and I think that's definitely a frustration for a coaching staff of how do we properly know how to build and what to build if there's no guidelines. But that's kind of been this era of college sports recently of a lack of guidelines when it comes to NIL, transfer portal. And now they're realizing, oh crap, man, we should have probably done a better job of setting this thing up, because it's truly chaotic. And while yes, it's chaotic, you got to take advantage of the chaos where you can. And when you're a new coach like Rich Rod, this is how you do it.
That leads into exactly what I was going to say. I think that if one thing you can credit this coaching staff for, and I think it's obvious if you followed this, and I know some of you out there watching this or reading on them, it's like can't even keep up with who's on the roster right now. And I understand that. There's so much change. But I think if anything, all of this movement, especially late in the spring, because it would have been easy to rest on your laurels. We got who we got. We'll roll into year one. If anything, this coaching staff is trying to win now. They are putting a lot of effort into trying to win now, trying to get players in there that can help them now, and honestly, kind of throwing depth chart hierarchy out the window. Even if you felt good at some spots, hey, let's bring in more competition. And that it's encouraging. It's refreshing to me that Rich said all those things and he's backing it up with his actions. And I think that if you're a fan out there, that's encouraging. We'll see how it all plays out. Guys are going to battle. Every guy thinks they're going to start. I mean, it's kind of the way it works, but it'll sort itself out. But right now, I do, from covering the team from a day-to-day basis, I think they addressed a lot of their needs. Did they address them all? Probably not. Would it surprise me if there's a few more additions? Maybe another interior defensive lineman, maybe another receiver, you can go down the board. But I do feel a lot better. I don't have as many questions just on bodies and personnel, because when I was first trying to put together a depth chart at the end of spring, I was struggling to find really a two deep on offensive line. Now I'm struggling to try to work all the guys in there. And that's a good thing because it'll naturally sort itself out.
And I think too, to that point, when you have as many guys as you do in some of these spots, it's easier to find someone to fit because you can kind of mold to an exact need, right? Like say you need someone to fill this exact spot, you have more options to choose from rather than you have limited or fewer options. And then you're trying to make someone that they're not. You have a lot of like a variability in terms of what guys can do. And that's obviously a good thing, especially when you have a position like offensive line where there was basically nothing coming back in terms of experience. Yes, you had a couple guys there, but not like that had played a ton of football. And so that's a big thing. And then just across the board, like I'm interested to see how it shakes out, Keenan, because you're going to have position battles at legit every single position almost going into the fall and going into August. And I know there's only a couple of months between now and then. It's going to go by like that. But this summer is so important for these guys. And you've heard Rich Rod, when he's gone on his recent media tour with the national guys, talk about how important the summer is and how they're going to be able to be more hands-on than he was when he was here the first time, and how that's going to be a big deal for this roster because of what can happen in the summer in terms of development and understanding where you guys fit in. And so that's why we're also going to have more portal movement, because you're going to understand, and these guys are going to start understand their possible roles and where they may or may not fit. And so we're not done with this by any stretch of the imagination.
And who knows, right now the transfer portal is closed. Who knows if this house settlement goes through, maybe it makes it kick it back open. Maybe they are all allowed to be grandfathered in, which I think is very smart on West Virginia's part. It just kind of taking advantage of that, bringing as many guys as possible. If they're grandfathered in, they're grandfathered in. I mean, obviously, some of this sucks. It does suck. It sucks for the kids. It sucks for the fans. But if you want to treat this like a big time business, you want to pretend that it's a big time business, which is what this has become. Let's just do it. Let's dive headfirst into it and start treating it that way. So
that means roster limits. That means like
nobody's getting babied anymore.
Hopefully calendars start to make a little more sense. Like there's a lot to be hammered out.
Please move to one transfer portal window. That's all we need.
Or please just do it after the season ends so you don't have.
Yes. I do like the changes though for this.
Yeah.
I like the fact that, the transfer portal is not open all year long anymore, because that was really annoying. Guys in August would be like, hey, I'm out. Peace.
Yeah. Let's transfer. Let's transfer on.
Hey, it works.
Yeah, let's transfer on to basketball. They have also been hitting the portal hard. And between the last time we talked on this and now, I believe everyone from last year's roster officially entered the portal or graduated, because you had Harris and Abraham both enter, and Ofri as well. So those were the three guys we were waiting on.
Big ups for Ofri.
Yeah, good dude. But now you've got 10 guys on your roster. You've got 2 incoming freshmen, 1 junior, and then a whole lot of old heads is what I guess the kids on the block say now. So, Keenan, where has this team done well? We'll start with you. Where have they done well in the portal, and where would you expect them to try and continue to find guys in?
I really like the 10 people they've added. I do. I think that you got a good mix. I liked how aggressive that this coaching staff was from the start. They went out and got the guys they really wanted. Now, did they get everybody? Probably not. But they got a lot of the guys they really wanted. Trace and Eagle staff, Honor Huff, Brennan Lorient, go down the list. Guys they really wanted, guys they really wanted to add. Obi Oha, I know that was a guy that West Virginia really wanted a big. So I really like what they've done. They found shooters. There's 3 characteristics on this roster. It doesn't work for everybody, but pretty much so. Size, versatility, and shooting. Most of these guys possess that. Even the ones that didn't shoot it a lot have pretty good numbers. Now, like I said, not all 3 things don't necessarily work for all, but as a general rule, those are the things that I've been impressed with so far. Really like the latest high school edition, Jaden Forsyth. I think he's a very good player. It's very easy to compare him to Jonathan Powell because of very similar situations. I think they even committed to West Virginia on the same day after being granted their release from Xavier 1 year later. So there's a lot of comparisons there, but I really like his skill set. Long guard, catch and shoot type of guy, and can really stroke it. So he's a guy that you can put in the rotation and help you space the floor. And there's a lot more upside to unlock with his game too, moving forward, as he kind of learns how to put the ball on the floor and score in some variety of other ways. What do they still need? In my opinion, now I'm not Ross Hodge, but in my opinion, I think they absolutely need another quality big. OBL has a good start. I think Jackson Fields can help them. Brandon Laureate plays the 4, but they need another quality big, a guy that you can get good minutes out of. Think of Eduardo Andre, kind of. But really, at times, Andre was your starter. I mean, basically until, Hansberry started playing better. But think a guy like that, a guy that can change shots, a guy that can score around the rim. I don't know if you're necessarily going to go out and land Shaquille O'Neal, guys. It's late in the portal game, but you can find a good piece there. I like the fact that they have some guys that can take the load off Jasper Floyd and play point. Even maybe a Trace and Eagle staff could play some point. But I think you need another true point guard, would be my take. I think that would help things a lot. I think there's still options out there at that position that could help you. And then I would like to see either another kind of a wing type forward / guard, that Chance Moore role, 6'5", 6'6", that can get to the rim and put some pressure on the rim and help space the floor for these shooters that you have around them. So I don't think they fill all 15. If they do, the end of the bench will be kind of guys that, you're not going to play 15 guys anyways. It's just not realistic in college basketball. You'd be doing hockey style subs every media timeout. So The rotation will probably be, I would imagine, 10 to 12 guys at most. That'll shorten down in conference play as it usually does. But I think if you can add 3 more quality guys, and those don't have to be superstars. There's only one basketball, guys. I know everybody, when they're putting these transfer portal pizzas together, they want to put everybody's got to have the best ingredients, but it takes a lot of different types of personalities and different roles to make a good basketball team. So I think they can add. I would of the positions, I'd like to see the best guy possibly be that either the point guard or the big. But I think you add 3 quality guys, you're looking at a pretty good roster, considering you returned absolutely nothing from the year before.
Yeah, I think going to your point about trying to get the best guys, like look what Kansas did, right? They went out last year and they got the best of the best that everyone thought like they were preseason number 1, stamp it, like they're going to go win a national championship. And they struggled.
They were bad,
especially in Big 12 play, especially like for Kansas standards. Oh my goodness. Right?
That's what's crazy about it. We're saying they're bad and they were a tournament team, but they for Kansas standards, that's the worst Kansas team since I've been on the beat.
Yeah, probably in the last decades, right? So that's because like it's hard to kind of make these things mesh, and that's where a guy like Ross Hodge, right? We kept going back to this when he was hired. Of look what he has had to do at North Texas in terms of rebuilding rosters, in terms of getting guys to click into his system in a short period of time. That's when you have an advantage up on some of these maybe like no shade to Bill Self at all when I say this, like he can probably go out and get whoever he wants, right? But when you're Ross Hodge and you're not having all the nicest toys in the world, but you're still going to have to play the same game, right? Like there's a science to that. I think that Ross Hodge might have an advantage over some of these other coaches. And so that's interesting to watch. I think bigs, like another big, is a key piece just because foul trouble is a real thing in the Big 12. We know how physical it gets down low. We know how like
Obioha was only playing like 20 some minutes for.
I know. And I mean, think about when Hansberry was hurt right last year and when like Andre had to play the 5 and then they really didn't have much behind him and he would get into foul trouble. And then it was kind of a disaster for stretches of times and games. And when you get into the dog days of February, like you just don't want to be worrying about foul trouble, especially at your 5 position. In terms of point guards, the dude from South Carolina probably is a great bench option coming in. I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly. Morris Ugasuk.
Ugasuk. Yeah.
Ugasuk. There we go. So that's a good piece. And then you've got a lot of scoring in the way Ross Hodge wants to score. Guys who can shoot the 3 ball. And I'm interested to see how the defense kind of factors into all of this because that was the selling point of Ross Hodge was look how good he was on defense. And so getting that buy-in, getting that ability to actually sit down and guard for dudes who probably care about their offensive game. I mean, it's a trickle-down effect likely from the NBA. You saw them start chucking up threes, and so every kid – it's the Steph Curry effect, right? Like all these kids now want to just chuck up threes because it looks cool, it looks fun. But the way you win is based off defense. Look at Houston, right? Look at Florida. Look at these teams that made it to the Final Four. It's because they guarded really well, but they were also explosive on offense. And so that's where I want to see. Maybe they get a point guard or a 2 guard, right? That is more of a defender who can kind of come in the game and be that guy on defense, and you don't necessarily need him to score. But there's certainly a couple of places at the guard position and at the 5 position that this team could add.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I will say is interesting, just when we've been lost here covering these breaking stories that have been occurring over the last month. I think that it was really interesting to me when I was talking to Jaden Forsyth. He kind of mentioned, that one of the things that appealed to him about West Virginia offensively was they're going to get out and run, get in transition. And I know pace of play was something we've talked about a lot, and they were very deliberate at North Texas. A lot of that was for a reason. I think it's encouraging that at least Jaden Forsyth believes they're going to be running a lot more and playing with a lot quicker pace. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that was one of the knocks, right? Like if we go back to when we were looking at all the pros and cons once he was like, that was one of the cons of, is this going to be able to transfer over to the Big 12? Because you do sometimes have to get out and go because some of the best teams in the country, their pace of play and whatever, that like all the analytics, like they go fast. And so we'll see what happens there. Anything else? Coaching staff. Yeah, so coaching staff has been added to and added to in the last couple of weeks. A lot of
The
North
North
Texas
Texas
guys.
Mountaineers.
Yeah, North Texas Mountaineers. Oh, remember the Akron Mountaineer? Remember that whole thing when all like three of them, when Okonkwo, Josiah Harris, and
Yeah.
Seth Wilson, yeah, went to Akron. Um, so with the coaching staff, Keenan, any kind of crazy surprises on your end? I think this was somewhat expected that he would bring a lot of his folks over from North Texas. Might have taken a little longer than we probably initially thought, but here we are mid-May with a lot of these positions starting to get filled.
Yeah, I think that the first three, absolutely not. I thought all those three were going to come with him. The last two, not necessarily surprising, but I didn't know if I don't think if Ross Hodge initially came into this thinking he was going to bring all five assistants with him. I think that kind of happens during the process sometimes, but I think it's pretty. At least it's guys he trusts. It's guys that have been with him. All of these guys have been on his staff since he first became head coach at North Texas. So I don't have a problem with it. Still got some money to play with too. You put all those salaries together for the five assistants and McClurg. I think you still have $380,000. Go out and get a GM or maybe some other people that you need to fill out the coaching staff with. So still got quite a bit of money, and that's if no more's increased, because it's written this contract there could be more if the athletic director deems it fit. So I think they've gone pretty well. They haven't overspent on anybody. I think it's been really the two that announced today the contracts I posted, Estelle and Shaw. I think they came in a little lower than I even expected. So I think West Virginia and Hodge are doing pretty well on that front. And it's not necessarily a surprise that they're all with him, but I think that there are some people out there that are going to say, man, where's the splash guy? Where's the splash guy? And sometimes you don't necessarily have one. It's a group effort, and I think that we'll see how it plays out. But I'm confident, that group, that core group right there, has already had a lot of success in 2 years, and now they're going to have better players, more resources. That's what the thing that people forget about recruiting. It's a lot easier to recruit at West Virginia than it is
Yeah.
North Texas, as you mentioned, Kansas than West Virginia. These
Yeah.
things are like fish that eat each other. So we'll see how it translates. So far, it's hard to complain with what they've done in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and continuity and trust are a big deal for these coaching staffs. And if you can't trust your assistant coaches, it's hard for them to be on staff and be effective on staff. And when these people have been with Hodge for previous stints prior to when he was the head coach, like when he was also an assistant, right? Like when he trusts them that long back, like there's something to be said about that. So we'll see what happens. But they're definitely in a good spot. So last thing here is the West Virginia baseball
Saving the
team.
best for last, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. Best after last week might be a little bit of a
Yeah,
stretch though. One win away is the magic number. One is the magic number. Either a Arizona State loss or a West Virginia win. Man, it would be ugly if they
I feel
both.
like Doctor Strange right now.
One win away from a Big 12 regular season title. They're
Can you
at
say that again?
yeah, one win away or one Arizona State loss. Their
How
magic
about that? A
number
Big 12
is
regular season title.
yeah, and unlike 2023 when they shared it with two teams, if they win one game, Keenan,
Outright.
this weekend, it's theirs. No other names going on that trophy. Um, there's been a lot of talk on our message board in the last week or so about what the last 7 days for the baseball team has meant, and they went 1-3 last week. Two of those games were decided in the ninth inning. The
Ooh.
third loss was decided in the eighth inning. Yeah, losing to Pitt, that was ugly. I would say the Kansas State one was probably worse because you had two errors involved in that, and you also had another extra run of a lead. Two things to say on this. It's kind of how baseball is sometimes. You run into these stretches. Like Carson Estridge, the pitcher who struggled last week, he was really good in his previous 8 outings. Like he had something ridiculous like 12 innings pitched, 15 strikeouts, no runs or something like that. So that's something to keep an eye on and how they handle him. But if this team wins the Big 12 regular season title, like if they go take 2 or 3 from Kansas or even sweep Kansas at home this week, Keenan, and they win, I'm going to say one game
I
in
know where you're
Arlington,
going with this.
I think there's going to be this thing called a regional in Morgantown on the last weekend in May. And if anyone remembers what 2019 was and how crazy chaotic
That was
that
nuts.
was, It's going to probably be that turned up to a whole nother level with the hype that's been around this team this year and in the years past. Baseball's building. We've talked about that on here, but there's a legit shot for them to host a regional, which if you said, like, take away the strength of schedule number, like, take away anything, if you had told both of us in February when this team got going, they'd have 40 wins with a chance to host, I think both of us would have said that's a great year.
Yeah. Guys, don't let the Appalachian fatalism take you too early. At least let the weekend play out before we start writing the obituaries. I know it's common. We've all been through this before. If you've been around the program, we all know. But let it play out. They just got to win one or have a team lose one. So it's still well within reach.
Yeah, and their RPI, that's what they've got to really start monitoring here over the next 2 weeks. It's right outside of the top 20. I believe it's at like 23 or 24 as of today. If you get that to 18, you're probably a host with having 40, 45 wins, a conference title. Heck, if you go and you win the Big 12 tournament next week and you win, like if you win both, if you double up, you're for sure a host. Like I don't know how you turn down the Big 12 regular season title and the Big 12 tournament winner if it's the same school. Like I just don't see how you can do that. Other Big 12 schools that could host, TCU's kind of working their way. They have a high RPI, but they've struggled at times this year. They're kind of the only other team. Arizona had a bad weekend, losing 2 or 3 to Utah. Ooh, tough one. But yeah, Keenan, they could close it out this weekend. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that would be something that every Mountaineer fan can rally around.
And they can do it at home too. They don't have to do it in.
I expect it to be very, very, very lively crowds.
Yeah,
especially that. Yeah, if it gets, I think it's going to be a party if they get it on the first night.
Yeah, it'd be cool for them. So that'll do it for this episode of the WVSports.com podcast. We will have more starting next week in terms of podcast consistency.
We're back, guys.
We're back like we never left, even though we did for a hot minute. But keep it locked on our website, as we always say. That's where everything goes in terms of breaking news, whether it's at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night, anywhere.
Or 11 o'clock at night, like Friday.
Right. So you just never know with this stuff. But I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. And this was a WestVirginiaSports.com podcast.